Today I'm joined by a person who contains multitudes. He's an academic who practices business, an author whose programs have attracted 70% of Kellogg students, and a researcher who's an expert in innovation, marketing, and AI. He serves on many boards, including Reliance Jio, and he studied at IIT, IIM, and Wharton. Today, he's Associate Dean of Digital Innovation and Professor of Marketing at Kellogg. Dr. Sawhney, it's an honor to have you with us at the Times of India.
It's my pleasure to join you for this conversation.
Your contributions in business, especially in modern marketing and tech, have been incredible to read about. So I want to start by talking about you. Walk us through some of the key moments in your life, say at IIT, IIM, and Wharton, that shaped your interests and really your life journey in tech, marketing, and AI.
It's an excellent question. Going back to my undergraduate days, as you know, in the 1980s, the only way you could make a living was to have a professional education, and everybody takes the IIT entrance exam, and so I did. And I got in, and when you get in, you join. I never really asked myself if I wanted to do engineering or was that my passion. Now, IIT Delhi was a fantastic experience. I was with some great people. We had some fantastic professors, and it was just a great formative experience. However, I wasn't really resonating with engineering. I found it to be a bit too dry. And in fact, I took a lot of humanities courses while I was at IIT, psychology and so on, human behavior. In fact, sometimes people joke that I don't have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I have a bachelor's degree in humanities. So following that, I went in to IIM Calcutta to do my MBA in marketing, because I found marketing was a really nice intersection of creative plus analytical thinking. And then on, I worked for the Tatas for a couple of years, and with the Tata Administrative Service, first in India and then in Singapore. Then steadily started to get a little bored with the corporate world. The intellectual component of the job was not as stimulating as I expected. So I said, well, let's try a PhD. So I sort of stumbled my way into a PhD in marketing at the Wharton School. And from then on, I discovered I had an interest in innovation and new product development. And my thesis actually was on the movie industry, predicting the box office success of movies. So following that, I've been at Kellogg now. Actually, this is my 30th year, from 1993 to 2023. And I have, in a very strange way, come full circle, because what I do now is specialize in technology, marketing, innovation, and AI, which really is a marriage of my roots in engineering and my knowledge of technology with my passion in marketing. So I think that through a combination of circumstance and strategy and serendipity, I've come to this really nice place where I'm both passionate about what I do and also, reasonably equipped technically to do what I do. So in the Japanese term, I've achieved my ikigai.
Yes, of course. But let's zoom in a bit on the PhD part. When you decided to do your PhD, for somebody who goes into academia, PhD is a necessary step. How did you think about, just when you were working in the corporate world, think about doing a PhD? Was it a predetermined path that you would go into academia, or was it something of an afterthought and you just wanted to study marketing and do a PhD?
I sometimes say that all strategy is constructed in hindsight. So when you look back, you can say it was all a very well thought out, a very strategic decision. But turns out it's actually much more a confluence of serendipity and an intuition or a hunch of what your passion is and what the direction is. So what I did know was that the corporate world wasn't exciting me enough. My brain wasn't being challenged enough. I wasn't being able to sit back and ask big questions and do deep research. So I felt this sort of tug towards doing something more intellectual. But that said, I didn't know what a PhD entailed. I didn't have a clear perception that I was going to go into academia. I in fact thought that maybe I'll do some research and then go into industry. But the way that the US system is set up, they train you in a PhD for academia, not for industry. It's a very specific role. So then when I did come to Wharton and I started my PhD work, I was a teaching assistant, and I found I was fascinated by teaching. I really loved teaching. So that then started to gel things in my mind, that this sort of interest in examining deeper questions intellectually, having the luxury to go deep and to think big thoughts, combined with the passion for teaching, then brought into focus the idea that an academic career was perhaps the best route for me. So it wasn't all very well thought out, but it was, I think, listening to the weak signals and following the hints that your gut is giving you has often worked well for me and has led me to the right direction.
That's wonderful to hear. As an Indian emigrating to the US in the 90s, how was it like? And fast forward to today, and I'd love to know what thematic shifts have you observed from Indians emigrating to the US then and that happening now?
So when I came into to the United States almost 35 years ago in 1989, as an immigrant, I think this was truly the land of opportunity. Even my younger brother, who is a very accomplished entrepreneur in Boston, graduated from IIT Delhi, a few years after me. And both, what was really funny is in both our cases, we had offers from Hindustan Lever, I from IIM and he from IIT Delhi. And we both chose to, not join. I went for an MBA. He came straight for his PhD. So it was really, I think, for people who wanted to study further, who wanted to work in research jobs, who wanted to do academic research or corporate research, India didn't have a whole lot of opportunity at that time. You could work with the Tatas, you could work with Hindustan Lever, you could go into the civil service, but that's about it. Even the multinationals who were here were perhaps just doing sales jobs. There wasn't the R&D centers, and that has all changed now. India has really become the laboratory for the world, but that was not the case in 1990. So this was sort of the logical place for us to come was here. And I saw many of my colleagues, in fact, more than half of my electrical engineering batch from 1985 is in the United States. So that was, what has been called brain drain, but I actually call it a brain reservoir because it does give back ultimately. So the shifts that I've seen since then are sort of twofold. One is that when we came in the 1980s, the 1990s, we were like little seedlings. Those seedlings have now grown into giant oak trees, right? So you see now in the tech world, which is where I live, the leaders of Google, the leaders of Microsoft, the leader of IBM, the leader of Adobe, these are all Indians. So these are the people who came during those times, the 70s and 80s, and they have now grown into very senior positions. And I'd say that the tech industry, particularly the startup world, as well as the big tech companies, are dominated by Indian immigrants. So that has been a very heartening development. And I think Indians make really good CEOs because they have empathy, they have humility, they have a cosmopolitan outlook, they've grown up with diversity. So all those things actually work really well. The other shift that I've seen, of course, is that now India is the land of opportunity. India is a market, India is a laboratory, India is sort of a place for entrepreneurial activity, and increasingly, more recently, India is becoming a hub for high-value manufacturing with the China plus one strategy that most companies want to follow. So now the immigrants who are in the US are connecting back to India either as investors or as entrepreneurs or as, in my case, as board members and advisors. So I think that brain that left India 30, 40 years ago, that is connecting back, and I think it's a very nice confluence now. So now I see actually that the Indian immigrants are getting more connected with the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it all bodes well for the country and its continued gains.
That's great to hear. And what you're sharing are these nuanced insights. So let's talk about insights for a moment. I really like this definition of insight that says that insight is the smallest unit of truth. So going back to your 2014 Harvard Business Review article, which was titled Where to Look for Insight, you talk about how Starbucks brought a bit of Italy to coffee shops and how Home Depot gave DIY folks, do it yourself folks, access to tools. Today, where can we look for insights? And how do business schools like Kellogg train us to develop that muscle of looking for insight?
There are some misconceptions about insights. When we generally think about insights, the picture that forms in our head is Sir Isaac Newton sitting under a apple tree and the apple falls on his head and he has the insight that leads to the theory of gravity. It's not that simple. Actually, serendipity, I like to say serendipity is too important to be left to chance. So insight generation is a systematic process. It's a methodical process. It requires research, it requires resources, it requires effort. So that's my first observation, that insight generation is a methodical and systematic process. Now, as far as where insights come from, there is a saying by a famous baseball player, Yogi Berra, who said, "You can see a lot by listening, by hearing. You can see a lot by seeing, and you can hear a lot by listening." So what that means is that we need to do active listening. We need to do empathetic listening. And so some sources of insight, for instance, are pain points, problems, just looking at frustrations that people have, frustrations that you have. So that you pointed out how big companies have been created with a single insight. This is true of Netflix. This is true of Airbnb. This is true of Uber. All these companies were born out of a pain point. In the case of Netflix, it was Hastings, the founder, getting a huge late fee bill from Blockbuster. And he's like, what if I created a service that had no late fees, where you could have rent for as long as you want? That led to Netflix. Airbnb was born out of the frustration that the founders had no place they couldn't find a hotel in San Francisco. So they had to shack up with their friends, So frustrations are a great source of insight. Analogy is a great source of insight, which means you look at what works in one industry and apply it to another industry. For instance, this company in India that I've studied and I know the founders well, it's called MediBuddy. So MediBuddy started out as DocSap. DocSap was the idea. It was an Uber for doctors in India. If you want to see a specialist physician and you live in a small town, the only option you had was to take a train or a bus and go and spend a whole day in a hospital for an appointment. But he created a teleconsult service. But it was the idea of Uber applied to doctors. So there's a lot of analogies can be a source of insights, frustrations, and also sometimes just questioning orthodoxies, beliefs that people take for granted. Right? So we took for granted, for instance, that computers had to be sold through resellers. But Michael Dell went and questioned that. He's like, why can't I go direct to customers? So that led to the creation of Dell. So there are many ways, many listening posts, many channels, many sources of insight. Customers are a source of insight, and analogies are a source of insight. Frustrations are a source of insight. But what you have to do is to open your eyes and open your mind and to really have what Satya Nadella at Microsoft calls a beginner's mind. And the beginner's mind notion is that you're curious, that you're always learning, and you never assume that you know everything about customers. And so as long as you have that attitude about learning and curiosity, I think the insights will come to you.
One thing I really appreciated in your answer is when you talked about finding pain points. And I was reading and even watching this video in which I really enjoyed your articulation of how product managers are effectively problem managers, that they need to solve a customer's problem in the customer's unique context, and not just, as you called it, build a better mousetrap. So for someone who's just starting out or trying to find meaningful problems to work on, how can they over-index on becoming problem managers and not just product managers?
I think that it's really important as an entrepreneur not to fall in love with your product or the solution. You need to fall in love with the problem. And what that means is continuously ask yourself, what is the job that the customer wants to get done? This is a framework that I find very helpful, the jobs to be done framework. The idea there is that nobody buys a product or a service as an end in itself. It's a means to an end. So what you have to do is to really focus on the ends. To give you an example, there's a cement company called Cemex in Mexico. Their CEO had a very insightful observation. He said that we understand that our job at Cemex is to help customers complete their construction projects. Because what they want to do, the job they want to get done is to build a road or a bridge or a home. He said, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to buy a bag of cement. So nobody wakes up in the morning and say, I need some software, right? Or I need a car. It is a job that they want to get done, and the jobs may be very different. Let's take an automobile, buying a car. Buying a car can be a functional purchase, which is I need to get from point A to point B, or it can be an emotional purchase, which is that it's a symbol of status. I remember going back probably 10, 15 years, the launch of the Tata Nano. Why was the Tata Nano a failure? Because it was positioned as a functional product. That was the cheapest car you could buy. But in India, you don't want to advertise the fact that you're going around in the cheapest car. A car is a status symbol. And therefore, there's no brownie points, there's no emotional satisfaction to get out of everybody knowing that you have the world's cheapest car. So you have to be careful to understand both the functional jobs that the customers want to get done, but also the emotional and social jobs that they want to get done. I'll give you a funny example of emotional and social jobs. There was a woman that was on a radio show, and she said, I broke up with this guy who was her boyfriend because, he had he had the dreaded, blue bubbles instead of the green bubbles. So he was not on iMessage. So if he's not going to use an iPhone, he's going to be Android, then I don't want to date him. So because the iPhone has become such a symbol of status. And to the extent today that in the United States, 87% of teenagers have iPhones. And and I keep yelling till I'm hoarse saying Android is better. Samsung has better cameras, they have better hardware, they have, better displays. But no, people are in love with the iPhone, and that's the social job. You want to be seen as part of that ecosystem. And in fact, today a teenager was telling in an interview that I feel like an outcast. They say, you have Android, you must be broke, that you can't afford an iPhone. So that's the idea. Really stay focused on the customer problem and what is it that they want to accomplish. Because your solutions will vary. The important insight from the jobs to be done approach is that the job stays. The customer's job doesn't change. Solutions change. Technologies change. Products change. So focusing on the product is a very, unstable way of viewing the problem. Focusing on the problem is much more stable. So that is the idea that I would recommend to entrepreneurs, is stay focused on the problem you're solving, and then find the best solution approach, because that solution approach may evolve over time. But customer problems tend to be more stable.
Let's talk about modern marketing for a bit. You have this 10-part video series on YouTube on this subject where you've talked about how we need to move from campaigns to conversations, how we need to have an always-on approach and not an on and off approach to marketing, and how we can let our existing assets do, as you call it, $0 marketing for us. Talk to us more about how, in an Indian context, this would apply, where we have 700 million smartphones, but only 500,000 high-value spenders.
Yeah, so I think that the Indian market, by the way, is changing very, very quickly. Just in the in several dimensions. First of all, the evolution of connectivity, and I'm proud to say that being on the board of Reliance Jio since 2015, I've been with the company since the inception. To what it has done is really ushered in a revolution in wireless connectivity, and now increasingly wired connectivity through fiber and air fiber. So that has really transformed the Indian landscape. India used to be the most expensive country for data in 2016, and now it is the world's leader. Data is incredibly cheap, and I consume 3 to 4 gigabytes of wireless data a month. At Jio, our average customer is consuming 22 gigabytes a month, and when they're moving to 5G, it's 2.5 times. That's 50 gigabytes a month, and all that for less than $2 a month. So that really creates a platform upon which now you're seeing many startups getting built, right? So that's sort of the first aspect, evolution of connectivity. Now everybody is connected. By the way, not everybody has a smartphone, but that is being solved too through innovations like the JioPhone Next, which now is a 999 rupee phone. It's $12 that for a pretty high quality feature phone. So that's one layer. The other thing that is unique about India, and people outside India don't appreciate this, in fact, people inside India don't appreciate it, is the work that the government of India has done to build the India stack, right? Starting with the universal ID, Aadhaar, but the one that was built, the payment infrastructure, UPI, and now on top of that are other layers. GST has been built, and now we're building Bharat blockchain, we're building electronic clearing houses, document lockers, and so on. This infrastructure where anybody's identity can be verified and anybody can make a payment to anybody really ushers in an entire ecosystem of startups built on this. Let me give you one example. There's a company we visited a few months ago when I was in India called Fusion Microfinance. So Fusion Microfinance does micro lending, and they've made loans to almost 3.4 million women. 97% of their loans are to women. How are they? The loan disbursement process at Fusion is 4 days end-to-end.
Wow.
And 97% of their loan disbursements are end-to-end digital. How is this possible?
Yeah.
3 building blocks. Verify identity, make sure the money goes to the right account, and communicate with the customer over wireless networks and smartphones. There you go. Had the government not built the infrastructure, had companies like Jio and Airtel not built the wireless rails, you would not have been able to create startups like this. So this is what I see now, that the marketplace is exploding. And all of this then creates a middle class that is growing, the buying power that is growing. So I think that marketing approaches for this newly sort of growing audience, India will be the world's leader in mobile, in using not only mobile first, but mobile only approaches to marketing, in leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence to create more personalized offers and communications. So I think it's a very exciting time for marketers in India to leverage these new tools and this new connectivity and this new infrastructure. The only limitation is your creativity and your imagination.
Let's change gears for a bit and talk about Kellogg and the business school impact. Business schools and the MBA degree are very much in conversation these days. Top business leaders talk about how they don't want to hire MBAs. And there's also this talk about how an MBA is a typical generic degree. Yet, we see applications to B schools at an all-time high, and CEOs of 13 out of the top 30 Fortune 500 companies who hold MBAs. What is the impact of a business school education, and particularly that at Kellogg? How do they train leaders, and what's their value add in today's volatile world? What do you think about that?
So the MBA degree has, yes, become very expensive in the United States. It costs, $200,000 for a 2-year program on the average. Even in India, the fees are quite high. They're approaching 20 lakhs a year and so on at places like ISB and IIM. So there is a real question about, is it worth it and what is the value? I think that a good business school degree, by the way, there are good and bad, what it does for you is it broadens your aperture, it broadens your horizons, it really exposes you to all aspects of business. Because, in your undergraduate education, you may have done engineering, so you're good technically, but you maybe don't understand how organizations are managed, how leadership works, and how accounting works. So it really gives you that full grounding in business. It also really exposes you to, and this is something we at Kellogg emphasize a lot, to teams and collaboration and working together and leading teams and working with people. And it also sort of really connects you with like-minded people who are very talented. And I sometimes say that your network is more valuable than your net worth. So it's the membership of that community that of alumni that you get is another asset. So to me, the MBA should not be thought of as a degree. It should be thought of as an experience, as the totality of what you experience in class as well as outside of class. The teamwork, the experiential learning, all that really combines to really set you up for the future of business in general management, right? Because otherwise you would be technically good, but you can grow in a technical field. But if you want to become the CEO, you have to have that 360-degree view. Now, at Kellogg, what we try to do is, a few things. We really believe very centrally that a good leader is, first of all, a 360-degree leader, which means that they need to have the creative, intuitive, and soft skills, but they also need to have the analytical rigor and an understanding of data science and analytics. So we really try to build well-rounded leaders, and that sets us apart. The second thing that we really pride ourselves on is what we call LIHE, or LEHI, Lehigh, low ego, high impact. Humility, servant leadership, empathy, right? So not having a big ego, is an important aspect of what we try to do. So I think those are some things that set us apart. But the other thing that we've done recently, and this is something I've been personally leading, is we want to be at the cutting edge of the new developments in technology, in artificial intelligence and generative AI. We were the first business school to launch a executive program on generative AI for business leaders, which we did in July 2023, literally 4 months after we started development. And we are now embedding generative AI and AI tools into our entire curriculum. So we even have a specialized, you talked about MBA being generic, we actually have a specialized MBA called MBAI, which is an MBA that is with an artificial intelligence specialization jointly offered with the engineering school. We also have something called the Triple M program, which is design and innovation thinking combined with management. So we're trying to really create pathways that bring some of the latest thinking in design thinking, innovation, technology, to add specialization layers to the general purpose MBA.
Let's also talk a bit about how this thinking at business schools trains students to solve for industry and innovation. You yourself have been an expert in innovation, and I want to ask you, reflecting on your time at Kellogg, could you share some key moments where the curriculum directly influenced you and your students to think about sustainable industrialization?
Yes, I think sustainability is becoming a matter of urgency given the climate effects. I think anybody who thinks that climate change is not real just needs to look out the window and look at whether it's every day either there's flooding or there's forest fires, or just what happened in Hawaii recently, what's happening in India with the flooding and earthquakes and so on. So we are really at a crisis point. Humanity is at a crisis point. So we all need to, both individually as well as corporations, as well as countries, really thinking about our sustainability as an urgent goal. And that is something that we are trying to drive through our curriculum and also through our actions. In fact, we just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago to talk about our own carbon footprint and our sustainability commitments as a school, looking at our energy consumption, looking at our, how much we even spend on travel, the carbon footprint of the travel of the faculty and the students. So, and we have created executive programs, sustainability for business leaders, which we launched a few months ago. It's one of the few schools to actually offer a focused program on this. We have a course on sustainability that the students go through. So we recognize that sustainability strategy requires, first of all, a mindset shift, sort of that awareness of the problem, and it needs to be woven into the fabric of everything you do. And it should not be seen as, unfortunately, CSR became in India some years ago, where the government said 2% of your net profits have to go into CSR. So people were checking the box. They were doing, what needed to be done for compliance. So yes, ESG today, and in Europe particularly, has become a mandate. But I think you need to go beyond the mandate, and you need to look for solutions in sustainability that are not only good for the environment, but actually can be good for profits. To give you an example, recently I was consulting for Kenvue, which is the consumer product spin-off from Johnson & Johnson. And we were talking about how they could do innovation in packaging that is more sustainable. So for instance, if you have a shampoo bottle, these shampoo bottles are put together and wrapped in plastic, which is called, tertiary packaging. So what they are examining, for instance, is if you could build grooves into the bottle so that the bottles lock together like Lego blocks, then I don't need any tertiary packaging. Similarly, if you have a shampoo bottle in plastic, what if you created a solid shampoo bar? Think about how Rin was created in India so many years ago as a solid detergent because people like to scrub. So I think that sustainability needs to be something that you think about every day and not something that's an add-on to meet compliance requirements. So that is something we're trying to do. And I think sustainability and innovation really are joined at the hip because you need to think creatively, come up with creative solutions that are not only good for your customers, but good for the environment and also good for profits.
Let's switch gears for a bit and also talk about the metaverse. Now, I've been reading this book by Matthew Ball called The Metaverse, and I've been intrigued by the whole idea, which I find to be quite an interesting reimagination of where we will be in a few years. What do you think about the whole idea, and how would marketing and digital marketing in all its forms change in this new paradigm?
So if you look at the evolution of digital marketing, it sort of went through several generations. The first, and they've been roughly separated by a decade or so. If you go back to 1993, 94, 95, that was the time when we had the evolution of the World Wide Web. It was at that time called HTML, Netscape, the browser, and the creation of companies like Yahoo and then Amazon and e-commerce and so on. That was the first revolution, which was really kind of what I would call the desktop web, or Web 1.0, which was HTML and so on. Then about 10, 15 years later, particularly the inflection point was in 2007 was the creation of the iPhone. We had the evolution of mobile commerce, right? So mobile apps became and that led to the creation of the Ubers of the world and the, and all of these web-based companies. And today, actually, we really look at a lot of the ride-sharing companies, the food delivery companies, and even e-commerce companies, like they're mobile first. So that was sort of the second revolution. And I think that the third revolution that is potentially in the horizon is this idea of the metaverse. This is sometimes we call it Web 3.0, right? So 1.0 was, desktop, 2.0 was mobile and data, and 3.0 is, so what is Web 3.0? It is the idea that you can now create immersive three-dimensional experiences or virtual environments. And the key difference is that in Web 2.0 today, we interact with the internet. But in Web 3.0, in the metaverse, you are inside the environment. So it becomes an experience where you can have, immersive experiences and activities. So that is the promise. The promise is to create virtual environments, by the way, which combine the power of the computing as well as the power of artificial intelligence to now, and increasingly generative AI, to create very realistic 3D environments and persona with which you can interact. So that's the promise. However, we're not there yet. And this was the mistake that I think Meta made in changing its name and so on and sort of, announcing that the metaverse had happened. Well, there are some significant problems. The user experience is terrible. Hardware is expensive. The software isn't there yet. And the barriers to adoption are significant. People don't understand NFTs and headsets and all of the things that crypto and so on that they have to do. So unless this becomes a very seamless mainstream experience, we're not going to see adoption beyond a few percent. And by the way, this movie has been seen before. It's called Second Life. Second Life was created in 1999 as a 3D immersive environment and so on. But it plateaued and is sort of just limping along because the user experience wasn't there. You have to make things easy. So I joke that the only way the metaverse takes off is that Apple enters the space, right? Because Apple always fixes the user experience, whether it is with smartwatches or whether it is with phones or whether it is with tablets and so on. So yes, they've launched the VR $3,500 headset, but they recognize that right now it's a niche product. It's a niche market. I do believe we will get there. And when we get there, we will have the ability to create very realistic, immersive experiences, and marketers will open up new vistas for customer engagement and interaction. However, it's going to take time. So don't get overexcited. Don't jump too quickly. You have to take a deliberate approach and make sure that initially you're not building mass market-based offerings or engagement models for the metaverse, that you're taking it one step at a time. So this will happen, but, as someone once said, the future ain't where it used to be. It just got pushed out. So it's going to take a few years.
That's a very nuanced answer to this whole metaverse conversation. And it's been great talking to you about marketing, AI, innovation, the business school experience, the MBA experience, as you put it, really where India is, where India is going, and how future innovations and experiences like the Metaverse would really shape marketing and the paradigms of business. As we wrap up, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to future leaders and entrepreneurs?
I think that leadership today requires a few skills that perhaps were needed in the past but have been amplified. And I would call out 3 things that I would recommend leaders do. One is humility. Humility is the lack of arrogance. Arrogance is the lack of ego. I like to say that the day you become arrogant is the day you become ignorant, because you think you know and you have nothing more to learn. And one of the big mistakes leaders can make is to think they know the most, or because they are at the top of the organization. Nothing could be further from the truth. So that humility and it leads to the second skill, which is empathy. Empathy is the idea that you need to connect with customers, you need to connect with your employees, you need to kind of feel, understand their point of view of others. So I think empathy and humility, which is why we talk about, high impact and low ego at Kellogg. Then I think the third thing that's becoming really important is sort of this facility with technology and this ability to understand the implications. Now, you don't need to be a technical expert, but you need to have the vision of how technology is going to help you transform your company, your customer experience, and your industry. And finally, sort of this notion of adaptability and agility, understanding that you cannot rest on your laurels. You have to be paranoid, that you have to continually change and reinvent yourself. And that requires this sort of belief that wherever you are, however powerful your company is, whatever market share you have, you need to continue to reinvent yourself. So I'll conclude with an observation my brother made, he has founded over 20 companies. And he said that as the CEO, I believe that I should be the oldest, the fattest and the dumbest person in the room. Hire people who are smarter than you. Don't feel threatened by people who are smarter than you. Hire people who are hungrier than you. Surround yourself with people, complement your skills. Because, it is important to understand your strengths. It's even more important to understand your weaknesses and build a team around you that can really complement you. So those are some lessons for leadership that I might have for the future.
Dr. Sawhney, this has been an incredible conversation. And thank you so much for joining us at the Times of India.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.